Can you share with us when you talk about unapologetic leadership, what that unapologetic part means to you?
Honestly, Julie, it's about being authentic and being courageous and being willing to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about what drives our behavior, what drives our decisions, most of the time it's our values. So like really looking within and saying what's important to us. Is it family? Is it helping others? Is it being courageous? And leaning into that, you're being more authentic, you're being more yourself, and you're not willing to let fear stop you from showing up.
Hello, and welcome to Pursuing Health. I'm Dr. Julie Fouché, family physician and former CrossFit Games athlete. Here, I bring you information and inspiration to help bridge the gap between fitness and medicine and support your journey toward your healthiest self. Thank you so much for joining me. Now let's get started with this week's episode.
Welcome back to Pursuing Health. I am very excited to be here today with a repeat guest, Dr. Kwadwo Kyeremanteng. There he is doing his dance, his boogie. So he was on the podcast first about almost exactly 3 years ago in 2020 during, the peak time of the pandemic, and really shared a lot about his personal story, his experience through the pandemic. It was an amazing episode. So if you have not heard it yet, I highly recommend going back to that one to get some more context, because we're really just going to dive in today. But I'll start with some background. And just a little bit of his bio. So he is the department head of critical care at the Ottawa Hospital. And as in doing that, he dedicates his time to caring for the sickest of the sick patients in the ICU. He also does research and is particularly interested in using ICU resources more efficiently and improving access to palliative care in the ICU. And as part of this, he founded the Resource Optimization Network, which is a multidisciplinary research group working to reduce health spending in this area without compromising care. And that is such a fine line that he walks very beautifully. He also has his own podcast, Solving Healthcare, which he launched in September 2019, which features interviews and discussions on the topic of improving healthcare delivery in Canada. And during the pandemic, he created Solving Wellness, which is a virtual health and wellness platform for healthcare professionals. And most recently, he has a new book out, which is called Unapologetic Leadership, Finding the Moral Courage to Do the Right Thing, which is such an awesome topic for us to talk about today. But first, just welcome back to the show, Kwadwo. I'm so excited to have you back.
Julie, I've been hyped. I've been so excited that we're going to have this conversation. It was so fun having you on. And folks, if you haven't heard her on my show as well, this was a killer episode talking about her journey, her resilience. You guys know everything awesome about Julie. So I don't need to hype her up too much, but thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yes. Well, thank you. I've been looking forward to this too, because you have such an infectious energy and it's always so fun to talk to you. So I know we're going to have a good time.
No doubt. No doubt.
So now, first time we talked here was 2020. It was just, probably within the first 6 months or so of the pandemic. And now I think we have a little more distance from that time. And all of us in the world have learned a lot of lessons from that experience. And so I'm curious to just start off for you, as you think about the pandemic personally, what lessons that left you with most personally, and then we can talk maybe even bigger as a healthcare system, what that emphasized for us.
It's a great question, Julie. And I must say, I have a lot of bitterness when I think about the pandemic, if I'm being honest. It was such a weird time where we weren't at liberty to speak about our concerns or to speak about different approaches to the problem. We were so divisive.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us that were trying to advocate for some more holistic approaches, thinking about the negative consequences of our approaches, and not only at times to say, not to avoid those approaches at all costs, but doing some work to mitigate it. Like, say, for example, if you did feel like schools need to be closed for an extended period of time? How do we make sure our kids, their mental health is on point? How do we make sure that they stay moving and stay in good shape? How do we
Mhm.
make sure they get socialized? Like, how do we try to address these concerns when we know they're going to be at risk? That's what got to me. The fact that we were just so narrow focused and not able to talk about how we could address these things more holistically. And so I was thinking, because I don't know if it was in preparation for this interview, but or just a previous interview thinking about this, that I'm still a bit bitter. I'm still bitter
Mm.
at some of the how a lot of us were treated, how there's been no kind of, what's the word, like what's the word when a bunch of debrief, sorry, there's been no
Mm.
debrief
Ah,
to just say
yes.
like, hey,
Yes.
this is what we did well, this is what we could have improved on. And I think a lot of us would benefit from a bit of closure.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like it could be very healing. And I don't know what that looks like on a societal level, on a large scale, right? Because it was something that happened on such a large worldwide scale that we all experienced and went through, and it felt like we were going through it together. But then you're right. It's hard. It's how do you then debrief that situation and say, and I'm sure it might be happening in small areas and in individual areas, but how do we bring everyone back into that conversation to feel like this big thing that we all went through together, we're learning from it. What did we do well? What could we have done differently? What were the successes? What were the failures? And coming at it with humility, which I know you talk about in your book as being one of the principles of unapologetic, or a way to be an unapologetic leader, and being able to learn from the things that don't go so well and not getting stuck in them.
Absolutely. And I mean, don't know if I should be coming across so negative, because there was also some things we really did well. The
Uh-huh.
fact that we were agile, we talk a little bit about that in the book too, being able to bend when we realized some of our some of our tools that we're using, for example, in acute care, weren't working well. We pivoted. Like, when I give a concrete example, we used to put patients on ventilators early in their course of COVID. And we realized that patients weren't doing as well. So we went away from that. We realized patients were often clotting more often than not. So then we started to implement blood thinners early. So that ability to be agile was
Mhm.
something beautiful that I saw during the pandemic. And so that was one thing that I'm hoping that we would take away. But yeah, that element of humility, you got, like, if you're actually going to make a difference and you want people to get behind you, got to show that human side. In my opinion, you got to show that you are you have faults, you're willing to accept them, and
Mhm.
most importantly, you're willing to learn from them. And
Mhm.
that, to me, when you express that you've made some mistakes, that shows that you see it. That shows that you have that capacity to move on and to learn from it. So I do think that it is an important aspect of all of this, especially if you're going to be an impactful leader.
Mhm. I love that. And can you share with us when you talk about unapologetic leadership, what that unapologetic part means to you?
Honestly, Julie, it's about being authentic and being courageous and being willing to do the right thing.
Mhm.
Because if you think about what drives our behavior, what drives our decisions, most of the time it's our values. So, like, really looking within and saying what's important to us. Is it family? Is it helping others? Is it being courageous? And leaning into that, you're being more authentic, you're being more yourself, and you're not willing to let fear stop you from showing up. Because
Mhm.
both of us are in medicine. We, I don't know about you, but for me, especially during training, you're not really being your authentic self. I wasn't. Like, you're really playing a part to make sure that
Yeah.
you get into residency, to make sure you get into your fellowship, to make sure you get into your staff job. So a lot of us were accustomed to putting on a show, putting on
Yeah.
not being authentic. And it takes a lot of energy. It takes away from our souls, in my opinion.
Yes.
But
And
to
it's
be more,
like you said, it's a fear. A lot of times it is down deep. It's a fear of failure that's driving a lot of our actions, a lot of our thoughts, decisions.
100%, like we're a bunch of type A's,
Mm-hmm.
like mistakes aren't taken lightly. And so that's kind of part of, like, it's kind of imprinted on us. And so if we can overcome that, though, take shots, swing that bat, and show up as our true selves, man, beautiful things happen. Like for me, Julie, I never thought I was going to be in some leadership position and all that stuff. But the second I start to be more authentic is when my
Mm-hmm.
life changed. It's like, okay, I will go on a podcast and express some of my thoughts and the ways that we can improve healthcare. Now you're starting to get some media, local media, national media opportunities. Now you're being asked to run for department head, to join a board at a children's hospital. Now, like all these things, us talking today was coming
Mm-hmm.
from authenticity, being myself and
Right.
sticking up and leaning in my values and really thinking about what's important to me. And I just really think if people are looking to make a difference, that's such a
Mm-hmm.
key component.
And it's so beautiful as you talk about that. And I think I can relate a lot in my own personal journey over the last few years, how much of it has come from me really tuning into my true authentic self and getting rid of a lot of those external voices and pressures, and you should do this and that because that's what people expect of you. But it's a hard thing to overcome because there are so many of these external pressures. And I'd love to hear more about your journey. Like, what was it that helped you to make that shift, to go from, the medical student trying to, just jump through the hoops to get to where you wanted to be, to saying, okay, I can hear my authentic voice now and I'm going to use it and I'm going to put it out into the world.
That is a great question, because it took a lot, if I'm being honest, because as a kind of hard to say it, but like even as a black physician
Mm-hmm.
in Canada, where there's not many of us, there's a lot of, you don't go under the radar. There's a lot of, you attract attention.
Yeah.
You're under the spotlight a lot, and your missteps can often be amplified because you're the one that doesn't fit the profile. You're not in part of the group. And
Right.
I don't know. It took, I'm in my mid-40s. It's taken a long time for me to be comfortable just showing up as I am. And what I think what changed really was, there was just a few lines in the sand where I just felt action needed to take place. It started off in a minor fashion when I saw how inefficient our healthcare system was. So I was determined to make it better, because
Mm-hmm.
looking to make a difference. So I started a research group, or resource optimization network, and we noticed that wasn't making much of a voice. So then, or making much of a change. So I started a podcast, and then the pandemic probably is what really amplified everything, because
Mm-hmm.
I was, after seeing the impacts that that COVID and our policies were having on our most vulnerable, like whether you say long-term care, whether you say our kids,
Mm-hmm.
um, racialized communities. To me, there was just a line that was being crossed, and I had that conversation with my wife, and I remember it very clearly in the living room or on the kitchen table, and she saw how much the fear messaging was, and some of our approaches were having on our population. And she's like, if you want to speak, go speak. We got your back. Like, your family will be there. We love
Yeah.
you. We give her, like, this is worth the fight, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, all right, I'll speak my truth. I'll speak about the metabolic disease that we were seeing when nobody was talking about metabolic disease. Talk about our kids. Talk about how racialized communities were getting hit the hardest. And I'm so glad we did. You know, it's you feel like you're achieving your purpose when you're showing up in a more authentic fashion. And I want to, I know, I'm not sure Kathy will listen to this, my wife, but always give much love to her for giving me the green light, because it's changed everything.
Yeah. Well, and it makes such a difference too to know that you have the support, right? If you go out there and you speak your truth, you've still got your family, you've still got your loved ones, like you have that safety at home to feel like, okay, even if things don't go as well out there, like I know what's important and I know I've got that. Um, and I think she wrote the most beautiful foreword for your book, Kathy. I want to read part of it on this topic. And just about this transformation in you as you started living more authentically and not letting that fear get in the way. And I think you made such a great point. You know, here we are talking about, you know, fear of failure as medical students. That's kind of a standard across the board. But you, like you said, as being, I think you said before, you were the only Black medical student in your class or one of the few, and the extra pressure that has, like the extra fear that you're living with day to day, it's on you. And she comments on that in the foreword about how this fear-based approach takes its toll. It's stressful to always be vigilant and never truly yourself. And like you just referred to, you know, for anyone going through life not being authentically yourself, it takes a lot of energy to maintain that sort of false identity or false sense of safety. But I want to read this part because it's so well written. And I just love what she says. She says, Kwadwo has always maintained an unwavering ethic of hard work and has always had a magnetic personality. But now it's different. When he chose to live with authenticity, act in alignment with his values without apology, he flourished, not just in terms of career success, but in his own measures of true success, doing the right thing and making a tangible difference in everything that he does. And most importantly, he has flourished in himself. It's not that he is immune to fear, but he now responds to it, not by running from it or changing himself, but by embracing it and using it as a signal that whatever he is doing may be hard. But if he stays true to himself and his values, he'll find the right way through. And contrary to his fear, this path of authentic, unapologetic leadership is less stressful and more fulfilling than he could have ever imagined. So cool. So cool.
That's part of the book, folks. This is Kathy's forward. Yeah, wow.
It is.
I mean, I always get a little bit clamped every time I hear that forward, because she just nailed it, Julie. She really did. And I couldn't have put it better myself. Like, when you go through writing a book, you kind of go through that process of, you know, articulating some of your thoughts and really journaling and really thinking through like why you act the way you act. And I didn't really realize it either, that transformation is what made me feel more true to myself, like being more authentic and just saying like, screw it. Like, I'm just going to show up the way I feel like showing up. I know I'm in this board meeting and everyone's stiff or whatever, but that's not me. I'm not stiff. I'm chill.
Right.
I'm not going to sweat the small stuff. Like, and that feels good. It could be isolating at times, but ultimately it's freeing.
Right.
And so, yeah, I really want to give love to Kathy and appreciate you highlighting that, Julie.
Yeah, well, go Kathy. She did a great job. And I think illustrates so many aspects of this idea of living authentically or living unapologetically, and how, you know, she acknowledges like you thought it was scary at first, or it might be stressful, but it's actually more fulfilling. And you find yourself, maybe some things in life change. You know, I think for some people, big things might change. Like they might change relationships, they might change work situations because they're in these situations maybe for the wrong reasons, but ultimately you find the place where you belong. And like you said, you feel like you're really truly living out your purpose now because you are able to be yourself and use your gifts in a way that only you can. And knowing that fear is still there, but it's a natural thing, right? And it means, you know, sometimes you need to have courage to overcome that fear, or it's trying to tell you something, but it doesn't mean that you run away from it anymore.
Absolutely. And the other thing that you realize is that once you start showing up more authentically, once you start overcoming those fears, you realize you could do this more often. Like it's like part of your DNA now. It's part of the process. It's like, yeah, I'm scared. I don't want to go up and speak about this hard issue in front of the board of governors at the hospital, or I don't want to bring this issue up. But I've done it before. Good things have happened because I've spoken up in the past. Let's do it. Let's do the right thing. And there's going to be somebody grateful for the fact that you had the courage to speak up or to act. And that's real important to me. And another hack that I do sometimes, Julie, when it comes to trying to overcome that fear, and when I need to like get that 5 seconds of courage to say or do the right thing, is I like to pretend my kids are in the room. Like I like to pretend like my 3 boys could witness and listen to the conversation and how they would expect that to act or want that to act, or what model I would want to show the boys. Is like, hey, this is a value in our Kyeremanteng household. You do the right thing, so I'm going to speak up. Just like, and I would want them to see that and embrace it. So that's another kind of, I guess, hack or a trick I use at times when I'm like, really don't want to say anything. I really don't want to put myself out there. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's such a great tip or a great visual. Is like, what if, or just the transparency of, if you don't have kids, like if other people were watching, what would you do? I love that. What do you think are some of the barriers? Because obviously a lot of the reactions that we had on a societal level, there was so much fear with the pandemic. And at first there was so much that was unknown, but what do you think are some of the reasons that lead to just our healthcare system in general, being more fear-based or making decisions based off of fear?
It's a great question, Julian. And honestly, I think there's the few layers to that. One, as I alluded to before, docs don't like to be wrong. We don't like to be wrong. We're type A's. It's kind of cultural that you always want to be correct. So I think the fear of being wrong or missing out or or mismanaging things, I think that's one thing. And then the second major one is, especially if I'm thinking about my colleagues that are in the States, it's the litigation side, like the fear of being put to court and having your name go through the ringer and your practice go through the ringer. I think that higher level of litigation that I see, especially down south compared to us in Canada, can really impact your decisions, and really wanting to make sure that you've crossed every T ever, or not put yourself out there too much. But yeah, I think between those two, I really think there's an element of the fear guiding decisions.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, this idea of just doctors having a hard time being wrong, and so much. I've done a lot of work on this myself over the last few years, but just how much the profession often selects for a certain type of person, and then the training really perpetuates that. And now the healthcare system, I think in a lot of ways, like you said, perpetuates that too. I saw this great quote. I just thought I'd bring it in because I saw it maybe a day or two ago on social media that said, kids who grow up academically gifted are now anxious adults who have thousands of abandoned hobbies and spiral into self-hate whenever they make basic mistakes, or they're doctors. There is no in between. And I thought, is that not, are they not both kind of the same? It's the same thing. God. But I think there's and it's not across the board, right? Like we're making generalizations, but I think there is a lot of that, and a lot of, perfectionism, a lot of being really hard on ourselves, being really hard for anyone else to see us mess up. And working through that, I think, is so important. There's so many aspects of our healthcare system that require healing, both, Canada and US across the board, but also there's just a lot of healing, I think, for healthcare providers in general, especially after going through everything that healthcare providers have been through the pandemic. There's so much healing that has to start there too, in order to continue to heal the system.
Oh, I couldn't have put it any better, Julie. Like, I constantly am seeing the impacts that the pandemic has had on healthcare providers, the level of burnout, the level of people exiting the profession. And a lot of organizations, a lot of groups, they talk about improving employee wellness, physician wellness, and all these things. But sometimes I worry it's a little bit too much. What are we doing on paper instead of like really asking the hard questions on what do we need to do to improve their wellness? And I honestly think part of it is mindset, to be more self-compassionate, to have that element. I think we aren't very compassionate to each other for the reasons you illustrated about, what it took to get in. Most doctors, as an example, you've had A+ your whole life, you've overachieved. There's an element of perfectionism, and yeah, you can't always be at the top of your game. You can't always get the result that you were looking for. So on top of every other stressor that we've seen over the last few years, I think if there's one lesson, there's many lessons in terms of trying to address burnout and the stress of what people have gone through. But if I were going to put my hat on, one thing is learning how to be self-compassionate, how to say to ourselves, it's okay to take time away from work. It's okay to have a chill day. It's okay to have that self-care. It's okay to not pick up that extra shift, even though your employees are going to be working that much harder. It's okay to prioritize yourself at some point. And it's like all that is okay. And a lot of us, including myself, it's not something I would say I'm very good at. Is like if I feel like I could have done better, whether it's on a research paper or grant or with patient care, whatever it might be, I tend to beat myself up too and say like you could have done a better job. But having a lot of exposure to the experts, whether they've been on our show or not, and it's telling you the value of being kind to yourself, I'll say personally has meant a lot to me. Like even just saying it makes me feel a little bit verklempt to say like, okay, it's okay. Like we've all done some amazing stuff, but we got to heal ourselves.
Right. And we're all human at the end of the day, but it's hard too. It's harder too when, right, your shortcomings could affect a patient, right? And you never want to, let that, we're in a profession where, things that could have gone better can dramatically impact someone's life. And so, but I think I've heard you talk before about how you are so, honest and try to cultivate in your trainees too about just always being honest. If you don't know something, just say you don't know, and maybe that's something that comes from the very strong team environment of the ICU where you can all work together and lean on each other. But how is that something that you started to overcome yourself and then emphasize for the people around you, that create an environment where it's okay to say, I don't know, and ask for help?
I love this question so much. I think it came from a place of empathy. I think I started to think of this when I was early in my staff career, like being already completed training. I knew what it was like for the trainees that are like, I was, only a couple of years removed from being a trainee. And I knew what it was like. You were getting grilled. You had a tough time with a patient. Nurses giving you a hard time. I knew what that was like, and I could feel what they're feeling in the moment, right? And so, to me, instead of having to think to myself, "Oh, I gotta know it all. I gotta have all the answers," I'd often ask myself, "How refreshing would it be for them to say, like, that, one of the specialists are coming in to talk about a topic, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, I didn't. This is new to me. Tell me more," and show that I am not all knowing. I'm not perfect. Owning up and say like, "Oh, I wish I would have given more fluid in that patient in hindsight," or like being human and showing that you are willing to be upfront with what you would improve on, allows people to grow together too, right? Like if your staff doc is saying he would try something different if he were to do it all over again. Now instead of maybe thinking in the back of your head, the trainee's thinking in the back of their head and thinking, maybe I would have given more fluid, but he's saying you wouldn't give more fluid. Maybe I'm wrong. Now you've validated some of your thoughts or your approach. Be like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy. Dr. K actually did say they would have altered course a bit. So I think there's just so much upside for you showing your true colors. And once again, it's more authentic too. It's just like being more real. And I'm just tired. I'm just tired of putting on a face. I'm tired of showing up and trying to show up in a way that people would find me more acceptable. I'm just done. And creating an environment where we all could be loose, we could all be open, it's just that much more enjoyable.
I love that. And you talk about too, just how, one of the principles of unapologetic leadership is determining, or one of the ways you can be a leader is understanding what your goal is, and then breaking it down to figure out how you're going to get there. And, to me, it seems like if the ultimate end goal is great patient care, right? How much better patient care are we getting if we're all just being authentic, right? We're all going to be able to learn and grow together more. We're going to create this environment where it's safe to be, honest about what thoughts we have or what concerns we have and learn together, versus one where we're all afraid that we're going to say the wrong thing because we're going to get, shot down, or that we're going to somehow, be a quote unquote failure.
Oh, Julie, like this approach I'm telling you, saves lives. I've seen it save lives. The fact that people feel like they can be open to spitting out ideas and not feeling that they're going to be frowned upon. Like I'll try and make it not too medical, but we had a patient that ages ago pulled out their breathing tube, and they were in this. They broke their neck, so they were in this device called a halo. So they're literally, you can't bend their neck at all. It's a tough airway. Like to secure the airway was going to be challenging, and they were having breathing difficulty. And so I'm called for help overhead. I was still a trainee, but it's me and another doc forced to try and get the tube back in. And we're working on it. And it's like 5 minutes in, and the patient's agitated, the saturations are going low. And this respiratory therapist felt the environment was comfortable enough to make a suggestion, and where we were able to essentially get enough oxygen through their nose to be able to buy us time while we try and put this tube in. And I could guarantee if they didn't mention that, I don't think the patient would have made it through. Honestly, it bought us an extra 5 minutes, which was enough time to secure that airway. And that was because our environment, the culture we've created somehow, was that we know that that respiratory therapist felt they could speak their mind. They could voice their opinion. Their opinion mattered. And if you were fearing of saying something stupid, like if they were to say that, and I'd be like, why would I do that? Well, that doesn't make sense, or whatever. And even if I didn't agree with it, there's always obviously a way of kind of, acknowledging it, and then, taking the information for what it was worth. But at the time, it was just like an aha moment too, because you could imagine in a stressful situation.
On one thing, yeah.
Yeah. And so they brought that up, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go. And I was so grateful patient was grateful too, obviously, that they brought that up. But yeah, as you said, like, what's the goal? Create an environment where your team can work together and people can have a voice and good things will happen.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. Speaking of, healthcare providers healing thyself first, I know this has been a big push that you, like you said, you're all about action and trying to put resources out there for your colleagues. And so that's really what came about with Solving Wellness. Can you talk a little bit about what that platform looks like and some of the cool things that are happening with your colleagues as they're tuning in a little bit more to their own self-care?
Oh, yeah, Julie, this was a fun little project we put together. We knew we wanted to do something for wellness back in the day, but what happened was I was in the middle of the third wave, which is for us, it was April 2021. We were we're the busiest we've ever been. I'm sleeping in the hospital, and this respiratory therapist who is normally solid, like very almost stoic. We were talking about a case, and they started to weep as we were talking about this case. And she's like, "Kwadwo, I've been on 5 nights in a row. I'm sick of seeing these people suffer. I'm sick of seeing them being away from their loved ones. This is hard." And so we thought we got to do something more urgently. So we put together this virtual platform for healthcare providers that provided online workouts, nutrition tips, yoga, ways of managing stress, all on one platform to try and do our part to try and reduce burnout, reduce the impact that all these stresses were having. So it was great. Like when we first started, it was 300 healthcare providers on one platform, getting communicating on what's working for them, what's not working for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest, Julie, it's pivoted quite a bit now because I think a lot of people have pulled away from the online forums because they're kind of zoomed out. And
yeah,
what has changed for us now in terms of how we deliver is usually now we've been working with companies that like healthcare organizations that want to improve their overall wellness and give retreats and seminars on some of these aspects of health, nutrition, exercise, stress management, community building. And so even what was the last one we did was a few months ago for a group called Bayshore, where we went up to Northern Ontario and put on a workshop for them. And so they had access to all the videos that we produce on Solving Wellness. But really now I think the most impact we're having is face-to-face with people and providing them with tools on how to stay healthy and well.
Love that. Well, I love that we can be face-to-face together again. So that's even better.
Amen.
That's even better. Now I have to ask also about how your kids are doing, because on the last episode, we talked a bit about your kids and how much you love being a dad and lessons that you're trying to instill in your boys. But I know you've also been really passionate and outspoken about, how we can do better, how our kids needed more support during the pandemic and how we could do better for them. So I'd love to hear just how you've navigated that personally with your own kids. And then, what are some of the things that you're seeing that you think we can do better for our youth in general?
I'm so glad you asked me this question. So first of all, my boys, they're like my everything. I got 3 sons. They're almost 11, almost 9 and 5. And they're doing amazing. We're similar to you, Julie. I'm sure very sports focused. So currently it's football and hockey season. So they're all getting into it. The youngest has just started his first hockey season, and he's the most excited out of all of them. I would say, shout out to Zeke the freak. But yeah, it was a real motivator to speak about how the impact of the pandemic was having on kids, because I saw it with my own kids. They went from thriving, active boys to less. They weren't thriving as well. They weren't as active, and I could see how it was impacting them and their friends around them. And so really, it was just important to me to try and advocate and do something about it. And now, luckily, now that we're outside the pandemic, they're doing much better. I see their friends are doing much better. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are still paying a price. What we saw, the increasing eating disorders, PTSD, or not PTSD, sorry, eating disorders, anxiety, depression, even rates of like type 2 diabetes were increasing in our youth. So we've still been doing a lot of advocacy, and to try and acknowledge these things. And one of the things we did was we started a charity, Bridges Over Barriers, to help out kids in our community to help them thrive again. Like, really, how do we give them the tools that they get to excel? So, as an example, if there's a kid in the community that loves basketball but his parents can't afford it, our charity will cover their camp and give them an opportunity to start loving the things that they love and get them back on track. So we've been trying to stay very active with on the charity side. We've raised over since 2020 about 220,000.
Wow.
And so that's something we're really proud of, and try and get my boys involved in that and any of the fundraisers and so that, you want to set an example to them to make sure that they recognize that it's important to give back, because they do live a bougie lifestyle. Just in case you guys are listening, okay, get off your iPads. But yeah, that's an important, and then because of how the pandemic was, I tried to be as present with the boys as possible, but there were obviously a lot of gaps where we were just really busy and not as much part of their lives as we could be. But now I'm trying to soak it all in, like help out on the ice when I can, help coach one of the flag football teams in the spring, which was fun. And so, yeah, just trying to be as present as possible with the boys, but trying to balance that with all the other things that we're doing. But they're thanks for asking. They're doing really well, and just hoping to set an example for them in so many ways on how to contribute.
That's great to hear. I bet it's cool for you too. I know hockey was big for you growing up, so I bet it's cool to be back out there with your son. That's awesome.
For sure.
Well, as we start wrapping up, I wanted to ask 3 questions I ask at the end of every podcast. And I know you answered them 3 years ago. I don't remember exactly what your answers were, but I want to see if they've changed in some way. So the first one is, what are the 3 things that you do on a regular basis that have the biggest positive impact on your health?
Oh, yes. Okay. The 3 most important aspects of my health, or the things I do that have an impact on my health, I'd say this is a bit of a different shift, actually. One of the things lately is I've really emphasized or thought more about my protein intake. So from a nutrition perspective, I never really thought much about it. Like, I think last time we talked, I was intermittent fasting. I enjoyed that. But learning more about protein intake, and especially as I'm aging and trying to maintain your muscle mass, improve your metabolic rate, that for sure, I've noticed a big difference since I've increased my protein intake, for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And what difference? Just energy wise, strength wise, or?
I'm more energetic. I stay fuller for longer. I crave less, and I've gained probably a good 2 or 3 pounds of muscle.
That's awesome.
Since really focusing on it. And so it's one of the things that anyone that asks me, I start preaching it like crazy. Like, you make sure you get that 0.7 to 1 gram per pound.
Yeah.
Assuming you're healthy. Yeah. And you won't regret it.
There you go. And you'll see it. I'm sure you see your patients in the ICU who have good muscle mass are going to do a lot better once they get out, right?
100%. It's like it's a body armor. The second thing I would say, I started doing fitness classes, which has been also an element of gaining muscle mass, I'm sure. And it's just like everything has gotten better. Like, I'm fitter, I'm bigger, you got the sense of community. So I do one, it's a boxing class that mixes weight training, and then another one called Powerhouse that you mix a weight training with a bit of cardio. It's kind of a CrossFit feel, but that would be the number two. And number three, the next biggest thing that has really impacted my health, I would say, is is trying to do things more with people, like connection. Like I really think if I've learned anything over the last few years, is connection is so important. And started when you reach out to people and you're seeing them face to face. Now I'm starting to laugh more. I'm starting to feel joy more. And it just carries in everything. Everything is a bit easier when you're smiling and laughing again. So connecting has been a big one.
Beautiful. I love that. What's one thing that you think would have a big impact, but you have a hard time implementing it, or something you're working on?
Oh my God, has to be sleep. I'm the worst. I'm the worst. A lot of people ask me about how to improve their sleep, and I mean, my sleep quality, I think, is good. It's just I'm not going to bed on time. I think if I were to really take it more seriously, I think recovery, mood would be better if I went to bed on time. And I don't know. It's just you get into this mode after the kids go down. You want to have some downtime. You want to live your life a little bit. And by that time, it's already 11 o'clock. So that one I for sure need to improve on.
I think that might be the most common answer that I get to that question. So you're not alone there.
Especially docs.
Yeah. So last question is, what does a healthy life look like to you?
What does a healthy life look like to me? It's all about, in my mind, being functional. It's being able to do the things you love. That's and doing it for most of your life. If it's connecting with family, if it's playing sports, it's being active with your family. To do that, you need to eat well, you need to exercise, you need to not be too stressed out. So really, when you think of the main pillars of health, to be able to achieve that, you really need to be good at all three. And yeah, I just recently had a birthday. So
Happy birthday.
Thank you. You start thinking about, you reflect on life around your birthday and what the years to come are going to look like. And yeah, I just want to be able to do all the things I love. I want to hang out with my kids. I want to be able to joke around with them. I want to be able to still tackle all three kids at once, so they know whose house it is. I want to connect. Yeah, and so I think that to me is how I would define health.
I love that. Well, this has been wonderful. I've so enjoyed our conversation, as always. And where can people learn more? Where can people get the book? Where can they learn more about all the things that you're up to?
Oh, once again, first of all, thank you for having me on. Thank you for being just a supporter, and keep doing what you're doing. Informing people on how to be healthy and well has been such a vital part of what you're doing. And I'm really appreciative of all your efforts. To see more of our stuff, we're everywhere on social media at Kwadcast. That's KWADCAST. Our book, Unapologetic Leadership, is probably best if you just find it on Amazon. We also have links on our site, so drkwadwo.ca. So that also will get you linked up with our book and all our other efforts. We got with Solving Wellness, our newsletter is all on that site as well. So yeah, that's how you connect with us.
Amazing. Well, I hope everyone goes and checks it out. And thank you again for coming on. I just love, even Yeah, I loved our first conversation, but this one even more, just again, seeing your authentic self come out and shine in the world. And I think the more each of us does that, the more we give other people permission to do the same thing, and the better we all become together. So thank you for sharing that and putting it out into the world with your book and everything else that you're doing.
Oh, better together. I love it, Julie. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoy listening to the podcast, please consider subscribing and giving it a 5-star rating on iTunes. It really does help to get the word out to more people.